He broke my heart at 21. Then life introduced me to the man who changed everything. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 76 years old now. My hands are wrinkled. My hair is silver. And most days, I sit on this old porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. Young people often ask me the same question. Grandma Margaret, what's the secret to a happy marriage? I always smile, because the answer isn't simple. You see, before I met the love of my life, I loved the wrong man. And for a long time, I thought that mistake had ruined my future. But looking back now, it was actually the thing that led me to the greatest blessing of my life. So let me tell you a story. A story that began in the summer of 1971, when I was 21 years old, and completely in love. Back then, I believed my future was already planned. His name was Daniel Brooks. He was handsome, charming, confident, the kind of man who could walk into a room and instantly become the center of attention. I met him at a college dance. The moment he smiled at me, I felt my heart race. Within months, we were inseparable. At least that's what I thought. Daniel always talked about big dreams, big houses, fancy cars, important people. He wanted wealth, status, success, and I wanted him. Looking back, I ignored every warning sign. Whenever I talked about marriage, he changed the subject. Whenever I talked about starting a family, he laughed and said we were too young. But when you're in love, you become very good at making excuses for people. For 3 years, I gave him everything. My time, my trust, my heart. I believed we were building a future together. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few weeks before my 24th birthday, Daniel asked me to meet him at a restaurant. I remember feeling excited. Part of me thought he might finally propose. I even wore my favorite blue dress, the one he always said looked beautiful on me. When I arrived, he was already sitting there. But something felt different. He wouldn't look me in the eyes. His smile seemed forced. My stomach tightened. "Margaret," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Those 4 words changed my life. He told me he'd met someone else, a wealthy businessman's daughter. Her family had connections, money, opportunities, everything he wanted, and apparently, everything I wasn't. I still remember the exact words. "I need a different future than the one you can give me." It felt like someone punched me in the chest. 3 years, gone, just like that. No apology, no tears, no regret, only ambition. I walked out of that restaurant feeling like my entire world had collapsed. The months that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I cried myself to sleep. I stopped going out. I stopped answering calls. I stopped believing in love. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of him. Songs, restaurants, photographs, memories. I felt embarrassed, humiliated, broken. The worst part wasn't losing Daniel. The worst part was realizing I had built my future around someone who never truly valued me. For almost a year, I simply existed. I went to work. I came home. I survived. Nothing more. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I worked at a small public library. One day, while carrying a stack of books, I slipped on a wet floor. The books flew everywhere. I was already having a terrible day. And suddenly, there I was, sitting on the floor surrounded by hundreds of scattered pages. I wanted to cry. Then I heard a voice. "Need some help?" I looked up, and there he was, Thomas Wilson, the man who would eventually become my husband. At first glance, he wasn't anything like Daniel. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply knelt down and started helping me pick up books. No dramatic introduction. No smooth pickup lines. Just kindness. Simple kindness. Something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Over the next few months, Thomas became a regular visitor to the library. At first, we talked about books, then movies, then life. The more I got to know him, the more I realized how different he was from Daniel. Thomas listened, really listened. When I spoke, he paid attention. When I was upset, he noticed. When I doubted myself, he encouraged me. He never made grand promises. Instead, he showed up consistently, again and again. One evening, after closing time, he asked if I'd like to have dinner. I almost said no. Part of me was still afraid. Afraid of getting hurt again. Afraid of trusting someone. But something about Thomas felt safe. So I said yes. That dinner lasted 4 hours. And for the first time in years, I laughed. Really laughed. Our relationship grew slowly. There were no fireworks. No dramatic declarations. No fallital moments. There was something better. Trust. Respect. Friendship. The kind of love that grows stronger every day instead of burning brightly and disappearing. A year later, Thomas proposed. Not in a fancy restaurant. Not with an expensive ring. We were walking through a park. The leaves were falling. The air was cool. And he simply stopped, looked at me, and said, "Margaret, every day is better when you're in it. Will you marry me?" I cried before he even finished asking. Of course I said yes. We married in the spring of 1976. Our first home was tiny. The roof leaked. The furniture didn't match. And sometimes we struggled to pay bills. But I've never felt richer. Because every challenge we faced together. When our first daughter was born, Thomas stayed awake all night holding her so I could sleep. When our son broke his arm, Thomas carried him everywhere for weeks. When my mother became ill, Thomas drove her to every appointment without ever complaining. He wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But every single day, he chose us. And that made all the difference. Years passed. Then decades. Children grew up. Grandchildren arrived. Life wasn't always easy. We faced illnesses, financial struggles, loss, heartbreak. But through it all, Thomas remained the same man who helped me pick up books from a library floor. Kind, patient, loyal. The older I became, the more I understood what real love actually looks like. It isn't excitement. It isn't passion alone. It's showing up. Again and again. Even when life gets difficult. Especially when life gets difficult. Then came a day I never expected. About 30 years after Daniel left me, I attended a high school reunion. And there he was. Standing alone near the back of the room. Older. Tired. Almost unrecognizable. When he saw me, his eyes widened. We talked briefly. I learned that his marriage hadn't lasted. The business opportunities he'd chased had disappeared. Most of the people he once impressed were gone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I felt surprised by how little satisfaction those words gave me. For years, I'd imagined that moment. I thought it would feel like revenge, victory, justice. Instead, I just felt peace. Because my happiness no longer depended on his regret. I had already won. Not because he lost, but because I found something better. Thomas passed away 6 years ago. Cancer. The hardest goodbye I've ever faced. Even now, I still miss him every day. Sometimes I reach across the bed expecting him to be there. Sometimes I hear a song and immediately think of him. Sometimes I find one of his old notes hidden in a drawer and end up smiling through tears. People ask how I survived losing him. The answer is simple. Because he gave me a lifetime of memories. A lifetime of love. A lifetime of proof that good men exist. So when young people ask me for advice, I tell them this. Don't chase the person who makes your heart race. Choose the person who makes your life better. Don't fall for charm alone. Look for character. Don't measure love by promises. Measure it by actions. And if someone walks away from you, let them. Because sometimes the worst heartbreak of your life is simply life moving the wrong person out of the way so the right person can finally find you. I learned that lesson at 24. And now, at 76, sitting on this porch with the evening sun fading into the distance, I can honestly say something I never thought I'd say all those years ago. Thank God Daniel broke my heart. Because if he hadn't, I never would have met Thomas. And Thomas was the greatest gift life ever gave me.